Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, 11 a.m. on Sunday is the most segregated hour of the week. 40 years after he made that statement, not a lot has changed. At last count, Jacksonville has over 900 churches. Every Sunday morning across the First Coast, thousands of families wake up early, get dressed in their Sunday best, and head off to worship. And chances are, the people they're worshiping with look a lot like them. It's natural. Religion is such a sacred part of people's lives. Of course, it feels comfortable to share it with those you have the most in common. But every now and then you find a place where these two traditions, one of worship, the other of separation, intersect and create something new and unexpected.
Moses got them to the edge of it, but Joshua had to take them into it. And our civil rights leaders took us to the edge of it, but if we don't sweep our souls of ignorance and fear, we're never going to get into that promised land. But I'm telling you...
That's Michael Smith, pastor of the Church of Jacksonville. If you drove by the church, you probably wouldn't even realize it. It's housed in an office building that stretches down the highway for what seems like half a city block. But the building isn't the only thing different from a typical church. It's the people. Settings like this can be delicate, and in many multicultural churches, pastors tend to shy away from talking about race from the pulpit. But that's another area where the Church of Jacksonville is different.
There's a major controversy about the use of the N-word among young blacks and older blacks, and here's what it is. Young black people argue we're taking the word back. It was used against us, and now the more we use it, we take it back. But older people argue you don't understand the price we paid so that we wouldn't have to be called by that name. You don't understand what we marched, you don't understand what we did, and for you to say it is to disrespect the pain that's associated with that price that we paid.
Hearing that from an African-American minister might not be out of the ordinary, but Mike and Connie are both white, while half of their congregation is African-American. We sat down with them to talk about the church and its message. When you walk into church, you see people of all different ethnicities, all different types. Like, how did that mix happen?
It's something we don't try to touch or try to figure out. There's a common thing that happens among churches, which is to try to advertise to catch, well, let's try to, let's get some stock photography of this race or that race, put it in our brochure, put it in our materials to show that we're diverse. And it's something that not only do we not think about it intentionally or actively, we don't dig into the whys.
I don't know if we necessarily set out to say, let's create a multicultural church. But what we wanted was what the church God would want.
That's it.
And when we think about, if you took a scoop of God's people out, what is in that scoop? If you dipped out, and it's going to be not just one race or another, it's going to be multicultural.
I don't really hear preachers on either side, black, white, or whatever else, ever really tackle the issue of race. And you seem to go at it full steam and not be, at least from the audience side of it, seems like you're not scared to go into that territory that people can be a little touchy about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I taught a series for about a year on race, racism, and religion. And in that series, I thought, as you say these things, I was thinking to myself, as you say these things, people are going to say, well, who do you think you are? But my response to that was, look around me. If you question my motives, you think, well, what is he trying to say? Look around me, the fruit of my life speaks for itself.
Now let me make some disclaimers. Number one, this is not comfortable for me. And I promise you, it will not be comfortable for you. Number two, I've made a decision to deal with this from the perspective of the Word. We will talk about politics, but I am not a politician. Disclaimer number three, it's a big one. I am white. Shocking as that may be, I figured we'd get that out of the way right now. I don't claim to be anything other than white. I don't claim to understand anything other than what I am able to understand from my perspective. I don't claim to be black. I don't claim to be Latino. I don't claim to be Asian. I only claim to be me.
He preached that series out of his personal experience, not what he theorized or, this is what I hear about white people or black people or, people of different races coming together. We surround ourselves with people of all different, cultures, black, white, whatever, and it's just who we are.
Mike Smith had a pretty common childhood. He grew up outside Orlando in a small community and never really thought about issues of race or religion for that matter. But when he turned 17, things started to change. His mother became a Christian and invited a black couple to live with them for a few weeks.
I would come home, they'd want to hug me, talk to me, and I was like, who are these people? Not only are you Christians and I don't want to have anything to do with you, but you're not white, you know? Right. And I don't think I was raised with an overt prejudice, but definitely a subtle environmental, you know? And that was the introduction of it. And so they had these tapes from this guy, and these preaching tapes, and I started listening to them, and man, it totally changed me. And you know, he was in Atlanta. He's a black gentleman in Atlanta, and I wrote him a letter one day. I said, look, I feel like I have a calling on my life, but I don't know where to start. He called me and said, come live with me. And so I moved from this white kid in Orlando into this black man's house with his family, and they literally took me in his family.
Now, the first 15 years of my life, I spent in a world where I couldn't at any time point out 5 black people that I knew. And at 16 years old, God moved me to Atlanta, and I could not point out 5 white people that I knew. I was sitting at somebody's house, and it was after church. Again, I'm the only white guy around, 15 black people sitting in a room. And somehow the subject comes up that white people, when they get wet, their hair smells like dogs. Now you're laughing, but now let's not, you know. Let me get my friend. How many black people have heard that before? Come on, be honest. Now listen to me, listen to me. And I remember I was eating my chicken and she told me that. I said, what? And you know what she said to me? Oh, everybody knows that. And let me tell you what it did. It shined a light. Because I said, white people don't smell like dogs when their hair gets wet. And let me tell you something. This is what I mean. When you live in a closed environment in which you never go anywhere, you don't even know where these assumptions come from, but they come from somewhere, and you just walk through life carrying them until you interact in some other place and realize that you had feelings about a thing that you never even knew you carried until, somebody said, were you offended? I wasn't offended at all. I was shocked. As I said, how could somebody believe that? And as I was hearing it, I thought, how could I have believed what I believed? And I remember asking her, who told you that? She said, oh, everybody knows it. I said, nobody told you so. I just grew up knowing it. And think about how much we just grow up knowing, but it's wrong, and it's not based in any truth.
No one does what they do based on their ethnicity. You know, people don't spin based on their ethnicity. People don't commit crime. Part of the chapter in my book is black people don't commit crime. Somebody said, well, of course they do. Look at the statistics. There are people who are black that commit crime, but it's not black people. And when you make the statement, black people need to take care of their children, you can't make that statement. Because nobody doesn't take care of their children because of their ethnicity. The statement is, mindset is rebukable. Anybody who doesn't take care of their children needs to because it is right. But you can't say white people are arrogant because we're not all arrogant. Black people are lazy, Latino people. You can't make those statements because nobody is what their ethnicity is. Because if they were, then everybody would be the same way.
The members of the church have taken this message to heart. Unlike life outside, when you look at the congregation in the sanctuary, it's obvious that people don't group together according to ethnic groups. They come together as a family.
I believe God wants a church that looks like heaven, where everybody is accepted, you're celebrated and not tolerated.
You know, here in the South, most of us are indoctrinated. You know, we're actually, white people actually taught that we're a little bit superior to everybody else. Nobody's quite our equal. And when I saw all these people, everybody loving each other, I said, my God, the world needs to be this way.
When you look around and you see everything else that God has created, when you look at the animal kingdom, when you look at the flowers, when you look at the trees, everything speaks variety. God is a God of variety.
It's easy to recognize that something special is happening here, and that special thing is beautiful and resilient, but also fragile.
I think if we're not prayerful, we could easily slip to a predominantly black congregation. Somebody say, well, would you consider that bad? If I'm changing lives, I don't consider it bad at all. But I feel like I would have lost something because I'm trying to get people into a new paradigm.
It's not necessarily, if we ended up with an all-black church, we would fail in the sense of as on an individual basis.
No,
and it'd be the same thing if we had an all-white church. It's because we believe that it's an awesome thing that God has done here.
Rewriting individual history, one person at a time. I don't know what your history was with white people before you met me, but I'm going to rewrite it in a good light.